This video is sponsored by The Coldest Water, makers of insulated water bottles and other gear, such as this 21-ounce sports bottle, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Now, as you probably know from the title of this video, I'm going to be looking at different ways of transferring an image. And I have very specific wants and needs for transferring an image, and that is so that I can get a drawing or a concept that I've printed out onto a piece of wood or linoleum so I can make a wood or a lino cut. So I'm not looking, it doesn't have to be top quality, I just have to be able to see the lines so that I can carve out the wood cut or the lino. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. I've heard about several methods, I've never tried any of them. Usually what I do is probably what most people do is I take the drawing, I use a piece of transfer paper, carbon paper or graphite paper. I cut it to the size of the block, tape it down on there, tape down a copy of the drawing that I want to transfer, and then I go over the whole drawing again. And there's nothing wrong with this. I've used this method my whole life pretty much, but it takes a lot of time. And after you've spent a lot of time, especially if it's an intricate image, you've already taken all that time to create it, and now you have to trace over it again, and it's a little tedious. Anyway, I wanted to explore examples of transferring an image without going through all of that. And these are ones that I've heard about, haven't used them before, and I'm going to give them a try. So I have a piece of birch plywood. I have a bunch of cut-offs of these, and I use them for all sorts of things. But I've lightly painted the surface, and to it I've taped a rather intricate looking printout of something that I've been working on. And I used it just because it's very intricate and I want to see how these transfers are going to work. And I've taped it on there. In this method I'm going to use acetone, which is why I'm out in the shop. I didn't want my house to smell like acetone all evening. And if you're going to use this method, you might want to be outside. And it's fairly simple. Wet something with some acetone and just rub it through. You just need enough to get through the paper. You don't want to soak it so much that it's dripping wet. And then once I do that, I'm going to burnish it a little bit. And by the way, this is printed with a laser printer. It's something that has toner in it. Let's see what that looks like. That actually worked pretty well. I think if I would have taken my time a little bit more with the burnishing, it would have been even better, but it's fairly dark. You can see the various details. That is a pretty good method. I can't get this over there perfectly because I didn't use the right tape. I may try to see if I can do a little bit better with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Let's try the next method. So this is eucalyptus oil, and it's an essential oil. You can get it in places where they sell candles and things like that. And I have a piece of my painted plywood and a piece of a printout, and this is a laser printout. Now this isn't new. I printed this several weeks ago actually, and I don't know if that will make a difference, but I'm going to try it out right now. So I'm going to tape this down so it doesn't move. And I'm going to put a little bit of this eucalyptus oil on a rag. And just enough to wet through the paper. We're going to see how that does. A friend of mine told me about this method, and I want to see if it works for me. And this smells much better than the acetone that I was using earlier. And again, this cutout that I'm using this particular cutout because it's very detailed and I want to see if the details come through. Because otherwise, what's the point? And I could probably look at it now, but I finished the whole thing. Oop. There's a little bit there. As I said, this is fairly detailed, so we'll get a chance to see if it's going to show all the details, or if it worked at all. So I think that's it. This is the moment of truth. Let's peel that back and see what we got. Well, it did work. I think I could have probably burnished it a little more. Let's try that. I don't know if that's down exactly. I should have used 2 pieces of tape. And I have this old spoon. I'm going to try to burnish it a little bit. And that did help. It helped a lot. Alright, so I'm going to call that good. Let's lift it up and see what it looks like. So there it is. And that really isn't bad. Take a closer look. And that got the detail really well. And if I took my time, I'm sure I could get it to look even better. But I'm impressed with this. And this was using eucalyptus oil. Not a bad smell. I mean, there is a strong smell of eucalyptus, but it's not. It doesn't smell like acetone. So let's move on. And now, just a quick word about my sponsor, The Coldest Water. The Coldest Water are makers of high-quality insulated water bottles, guaranteed to keep your beverage cold for up to 36 hours. Now, I put this water in here almost 24 hours ago. It's still ice cold. Now, you can enter to win free gear from The Coldest Water by clicking on the first link in my description below, or if you follow the second link, you can get 10% off anything that you buy. You can also enter the code MAYOTTE, M-A-Y-O-T-T-E, at any time when ordering, and you will get 10% off your order. Now, back to the video. So the next method I'm going to try involves just using a regular inkjet printer, and it calls for taking some wax paper or some other glossy paper and printing directly onto that, and then just burnishing it onto whatever it is you're trying to transfer it to. So I didn't have any wax paper, but I had some parchment paper. So I've taped it to this piece of scrap paper, which is an old piece of copy paper, with the glossy side up. I'm going to run it through my inkjet printer, and we'll try this method out. So I will put it in my printer, put it on a new piece of paper, and I'll slide it in my printer with the waxy side down this time. You want to make sure that you tape it down to a piece of paper so it doesn't get caught in the printer. Let's go try it out. Alright, so I'll get it off the paper and cut it to size. Tape stuck to me. And supposedly, if you just burnish this, it'll come off. Oh, I'm told that if you wet the surface a little bit, it helps. I'll try it without it first. I'll try it. Give it a fighting chance. Well, it's actually working. As I said, if I was going to use this for something, I would have taped it down a little better, but I mean, that's, you can see that just fine. And I'm going to put a little water on it and try just dampen it a little bit. So through the magic of editing, it took me absolutely no time to go get a piece of damp paper towel. I'm going to dampen this part of it over here. See how much of a difference that makes, if any. So this doesn't have to be perfect, but I'd like to get it close. And as I said, if this were an actual project I was doing, I would tape this down better so it wasn't moving so much. Oh yes, wetting it does help. Don't make it too wet. It seems to make it a little bit runny, but all in all, I would say this is not a bad method, and you don't need a laser printer to do it. This is Inkjet, and it's definitely darker where I dampened it. Just don't make it too wet. But I think this worked fine. Let me wet the rest of it and finish it. So I think if you were making a lino cut or a wood cut or something like that, you'd be able to follow that with no problem. So there you have it. 3 methods of transferring an image to a piece of linoleum or a piece of wood so you can start carving your block print. Another advantage to these methods are if you have writing in your artwork, you won't have to reverse it. The process of transferring the image does that for you automatically. So let's have a quick review of these methods. First, the acetone. Using acetone worked really well. It's fairly dark and it's a clear enough image so that I can see all the details. The downside, of course, to using it you have to work with a harsh chemical and it smells. You really need to use it outside. On the upside, it's very economical. I mean, you can buy a quart of this fairly inexpensively, and that's enough to do thousands of transfers if that's what you're using it for. The next one was the eucalyptus oil, which I think was just as good as the acetone. Again, it's dark, it's nice and clear, and it's fairly easy to do. I really don't think there is a downside to it. The eucalyptus oil is more expensive than the acetone, but unless you're going to be doing thousands of these, the cost is minimal. And it smells much better than the acetone, and you can do it inside your house because of that. The burnishing method with the inkjet, this is the only method that I used that used an inkjet printer. The other two, of course, you needed to have a laser printer or have it printed with a printer that uses toner. But this one is not so. It is not as dark, but you can see it just fine, and there's no reason you couldn't use it. The upside to this, of course, is that you can use an inkjet printer, which many people have in their homes. The only downside, really, is that it is not as crisp and clear and dark as the other one, but it's perfectly usable. So while making this video, I also tried a gel method for both laser and inkjet, and they kind of sort of worked, and in the end I deemed them unsuitable for my needs, but it's a method that you might want to try out sometime. If you like my videos, then please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.